If you keep living the same way, it's not a lack of strength, it's a lack of transforming your level of consciousness. This journey was created as a training in conscious advancement, not as a system to box you into a fixed stage. This isn't about telling you where you are, but about showing you how to move. Consciousness is not a static trait, it's a capacity that develops, strengthens, and expands step by step. Each level you'll go through represents a natural phase of growth that activates when you stop living on autopilot and begin directing your energy with real intention. Throughout this journey, you won't just understand how consciousness operates, you'll learn to use it. Each level delivers a concrete tool to overcome the previous state and advance to the next. It's not about thinking differently for a few minutes, but about integrating new ways of responding, deciding, and acting that transform your way of creating reality in a sustained manner. Consciousness doesn't evolve by accumulating information. It evolves when what's understood becomes internal action. That's why this journey isn't abstract or theoretical. It's practical, progressive, and deeply transformative. Each stage invites you to release a limited way of living and to develop a new internal skill that expands your emotional, mental, and energetic power. Here, you'll discover that real growth doesn't happen by forcing results, but by strengthening the foundation from which you act. When a stage integrates, the next one opens without struggle. Effort becomes more intelligent, decisions clearer, and life begins to respond with less resistance. Advancing in consciousness isn't escaping reality. It's learning to move within it with greater mastery. This journey doesn't seek for you to stay analyzing who you are today. It accompanies you to become who you're ready to be now. Each level is an invitation to grow, to overcome internal limits, and to expand your capacity to sustain clarity, stability, and power. Because unstoppable power isn't born from understanding more. It's born from advancing consciously when life asks you for the next step. Level 1. Survival consciousness. Life commands and you can only react. At this level, existence is lived as an external force that pushes, pressures, and decides. Circumstances seem to have more power than any intention. Fear, guilt, a constant sensation of scarcity, and the idea that something is always missing predominate. Energy is consumed defending the little you have, justifying decisions, or resisting what comes. There's no strategy, no vision, only response. It's not weakness, it's pure survival. This is the ground from which all conscious evolution begins. From here, a silent but powerful narrative is born. Life happens to me. I have no real control. Circumstances rule. Under this perception, the world becomes unpredictable and threatening. Blame is sought, external explanations, or resignation as a protection mechanism. The problem isn't what happens, but from where what happens is lived. While consciousness perceives itself as an effect, internal power remains dormant, and no deep change can be sustained from that position. The first breakthrough doesn't happen outside, it happens inside. A crack appears in the usual story. And if not everything is the fault of the external, and if something internal is also participating, here emerges one of the most liberating understandings of the entire journey. Responsibility doesn't mean guilt, it means authorship. It means recognizing patterns that repeat, decisions made on autopilot, and emotions that govern without being questioned. Observing without justifying yourself becomes the first real act of power. When emotional authorship begins to activate, something changes. Not everything feels unfair anymore. There's still no control, but helplessness disappears. A new sensation emerges, uncomfortable and powerful at the same time. Life no longer just happens. You also respond to it, recognizing that not everything is chosen, but that how you respond is always chosen. Concentrates the energy that was previously lost in complaints and explanations. That is the birth of initial personal power. The step to the next level happens when that authorship awakens a different impulse. It's no longer enough to resist. The need to do something appears, to push, to actively change reality, not from complaint, but from will. At that point, a new belief begins to form. Perhaps with effort, discipline, and sustained action, life can transform. There, survival closes passive and effort consciousness opens, the exact moment when energy stops reacting and starts pushing. As long as you blame, you don't advance. Level 2. Effort consciousness. Life is hard, but it can be won. At this level, a force appears that didn't exist before. Resignation breaks and the will to move forward emerges. Discipline, ambition, and the deep need to prove that it's possible to change. Course, awaken. Life stops feeling like something that just happens and begins to be seen as terrain that can be conquered with hard work, sacrifice, and control. Here, a powerful belief is born. If you push hard enough, results will come. Energy stops waiting for permission and starts pressuring reality with determination. This stage is decisive because it breaks the inertia of the previous level. Thanks to it, habits are built, routines are strengthened, and character is developed. The capacity to sustain effort appears, even when there's no motivation. Many external transformations begin here. You work more, demand more, and advance more than ever. However, along with progress comes constant tension. Everything seems to depend on the push. Rest begins to be seen as weakness and pause as wasted time. When internal value is measured only by how much you struggle, wear becomes inevitable. And then a truth emerges that crosses this level like a silent warning. Effort without consciousness wears out. A clear historical reflection of this consciousness is Napoleon Bonaparte, whose life shows the extraordinary power of discipline, strategy, and applied will. His rise was possible thanks to an unbreakable internal force and an exceptional capacity to sustain constant pressure. But his story also reveals the limit of this level. When struggle isn't balanced with vision, flexibility, and internal consciousness, the same effort that builds can end up consuming. External victory doesn't always guarantee internal stability. At this point, something fundamental begins to become evident. Not all pushing generates real advancement. Pushing without direction disperses energy and exhausts body and mind. Authentic growth at this level occurs when effort begins to organize, when goals become clear, habits are ordered, and discipline stops feeling like punishment to become structure. Energy stops being spent on everything and starts concentrating on the essential. Control no longer seeks to dominate the environment, but to regulate one's own emotional response to it. You learn to choose battles and to sustain action without living in constant war. The transit to the next level occurs naturally when a new concern arises. How to achieve more without living in permanent tension. How to build without feeling that everything is an endless fight. That question marks the closure of effort consciousness, when struggle begins to transform into strategy, when the desire to optimize appears instead of just resisting. A different door opens. Life stops being seen as a battlefield and starts being understood as a system that can be organized, adjusted, and improved. Their achievement consciousness is born, the moment when brute force transforms into applied intelligence. Level 3. Achievement consciousness. Stop struggling and start mastering the system. At this level, a silent but decisive change occurs. Life stops feeling like an endless battle and starts being perceived as something that can be understood, organized, and improved. Energy is no longer wasted pushing without direction. Now it focuses. Productivity, strategy, and the need for each action to make sense appear. A powerful internal certainty emerges. If I improve my methods, I improve my results. And with that certainty, chaos begins to order itself. Here, you learn to look at reality with different eyes. Time stops being an enemy and becomes a resource. Decisions are no longer made only by impulse or urgency, but by impact. Processes are analyzed, errors corrected, and what was previously done automatically is optimized. Life begins to respond with visible results, stability, and a growing sensation of control. For the first time, advancement feels predictable, and that generates confidence. This level reflects an understanding that transformed the history of modern thought, the idea that effectiveness doesn't depend on doing more, but on doing better, an approach that was deeply developed by Peter Drucker, who demonstrated that conscious improvement of systems changes entire destinies. Here it's understood that growth isn't a matter of intensity, but of precision. that applied intelligence surpasses sustained force. However, this level also holds a subtle trap. Little by little, internal value begins to be measured by performance. Results become identity. Rest feels unproductive and pause generates guilt. You achieve more than ever, but something internal begins to tense. The system works, but it doesn't always feel fulfilling. And at that point, a truth appears that crosses this entire level like an uncomfortable whisper. Achieving is not the same as living aligned. This discomfort isn't failure, it's evolution. It's the signal that external achievement no longer suffices by itself. A new question emerges, deeper and more dangerous. From where am I building all this? What intention moves me while I optimize my life? When these questions appear, the EI's focus begins to shift. It's no longer enough for the system to work. Now how it feels to inhabit it matters. The transit to the next level occurs when optimization stops being only technical and starts becoming internal. When not only results are evaluated, but states. When it's understood that internal coherence precedes any sustainable achievement. That's the exact point where achievement consciousness fulfills its function and transforms. The moment when efficiency gives way to alignment and life stops being just a well-managed system to become a conscious expression of who lives it. Level 4. Intention consciousness. I choose who I am while I do. At this level, a silent but decisive turn occurs. Attention stops being placed only on what is done and begins to shift toward the internal place from where you act. Clarity, alignment, and a coherence that doesn't depend on immediate results appear. Something essential is understood. Intention precedes result, not as an abstract, spiritual idea, but as direct experience. The same act performed from different states produces completely different realities. Here, a truth is revealed that changes the way of living. Being creates more than doing. Action stops being automatic and starts being born from a conscious internal choice. You learn to select emotional states, to order internal dialogue, and to align thought, emotion, and movement. Life is no longer lived from haste or reaction, but from a clarity that simplifies. Decisions feel cleaner, more exact, and less forced. This level finds a deep reflection in the philosophy of Marcus Aurelius, who taught that it's not the facts that determine experience, but the internal posture with which they're faced. His vision showed that internal mastery precedes any external order. Here, it's understood that not everything can be controlled, but you can choose from where you respond. And that choice completely changes reality's impact. As intention becomes conscious, something begins to soften, friction diminishes. Decisions stop feeling like internal battles. You act with greater calm, but with more precision. There's no passivity, there's coherence, there's no haste, there's direction. And then a truth is confirmed that crosses this level from beginning to end. When you change the intention, you change the result, not because the world obeys ideas, but because it responds to sustained internal states. The step to the next level occurs when coherence becomes stable, when it's no longer necessary to monitor each action, because the internal state remains aligned naturally. At that point, action begins to flow without excessive effort. Life stops feeling heavy and begins to move with synchrony. Intention no longer needs to be controlled, it simply expresses itself. There, the door opens to flow consciousness, the moment when acting stops feeling like pushing and begins to feel like accompanying life's movement. Level 5, flow consciousness, when stopping pushing becomes advancing. This level isn't reached by seeking comfort, it's reached after having ordered intention. Flow doesn't appear by chance, it appears when action stops being contaminated by fear, urgency, or need for control. Here, life begins to feel different. There's less effort, more results, and a clear sensation of being on the right path. Not because everything is easy, but because everything feels aligned. Action no longer is born from internal pressure, it's born from a deeper listening. Reaching this level implies having gone through a key understanding from the previous level. Intention is already clear and stable. It's no longer necessary to monitor each thought or emotion. Coherence sustains itself. At that point, excessive control begins to get in the way. Pushing too much breaks the rhythm. Forcing decisions generates friction, and then a new internal skill emerges, knowing when to act and when not to, knowing how to wait without anxiety, knowing how to move without interfering. This state has been described for centuries by deep traditions. Lao Tzu was the one who taught that true power doesn't act against the current, but with it. His vision of natural movement shows that what is forced weakens and what is accompanied strengthens. At this level, the teaching is lived not as theory, but as direct experience. Inspired action replaces compulsive action. Here, you learn to release control without falling into passivity. You listen to intuition as an internal guide refined by previous levels. You act when it's time, not when fear pushes. You stop intervening out of anxiety and start trusting life's own rhythm. And in that release, something unexpected occurs. Opportunities appear without pursuit. Decisions feel correct before being rationalized. Manifestation becomes natural and sustained. This level is recognized by a truth that crosses it completely. What you don't force flows. When that understanding integrates, effort stops being the protagonist and becomes silent support. Life no longer feels like something that must be dominated, but like something that responds when you don't interfere. However, flow can still be lived from personal benefit, and there, the next threshold of consciousness appears. The step to the next level occurs when a broader understanding emerges. Movement isn't only individual. Personal flow impacts the environment. Aligned actions don't only benefit who performs them, they also order what they touch. When this interconnection begins to feel real, when success stops being perceived as something isolated and starts being seen as part of a greater whole, the door opens to a deeper consciousness, unity consciousness, where giving and receiving stop being opposites and reveal themselves as the same movement. Level 6, unity consciousness. Nothing is separated, everything responds. At this level, a deep expansion of perception occurs. Life stops being lived as something individual and begins to feel like a living weave where everything is connected. Actions are no longer measured only by personal benefit, but by impact. Compassion, sense of purpose, and a clear understanding appear. Success is not isolated. Each achievement orders or disorders something beyond oneself. Here, it's understood not as a moral idea, but as direct experience that giving and receiving are the same movement. Reaching this level doesn't occur by good intention, it occurs by internal maturity. Flow is already integrated and inspired action sustains itself. At that point, an inevitable question arises: what is everything that has been developed being used for? Talents, clarity, results, and energy begin to ask for a broader channel. Growth stops feeling complete when it only revolves around the self. That discomfort is the door. It's not guilt, it's expansion. A historical reference that embodies this consciousness is Mahatma Gandhi, whose life showed that the deepest power isn't born from dominance, but from coherence between values, action, and service. His influence wasn't sustained in imposition, but in alignment. Here it's understood that when action is born from genuine contribution, the environment responds with natural support. The essential practice of this level consists of using talents in service of the whole, not as sacrifice or obligation, but as natural expression of what you already are, creating from contribution, not from ego. Choosing actions that elevate the entire system, not only immediate benefit. Listening to where energy contributes most value and directing it there. When focus shifts from personal recognition to real impact, purpose becomes clear and stable. At this level, a different expansion unlocks. Opportunities expand, resources circulate, and the sensation of support increases. Not because reward is expected, but because movement is aligned with the whole. A truth is confirmed that crosses this stage from beginning to end. When you contribute to the whole, the whole sustains you, and that support doesn't feel like external help, but like a deep internal stability. The step to the next level occurs when even the identity of serving begins to release. When there's no longer a need to do something to feel useful or valuable, action continues occurring, but without internal effort. Purpose no longer needs to prove itself. At that point, a different presence emerges, silent, stable. Power stops seeking expression and begins to emanate by itself. There, the door opens to the last level, sovereign consciousness, where nothing is asked, nothing is pursued, and nothing needs to be proven. Level 7, sovereign consciousness. Power emanates from me. At this level, there's no longer search, no struggle, no urgency. Life is lived from presence, peace, and a deep neutrality that doesn't depend on circumstances. Power stops feeling like something obtained and begins to be experienced as something radiated. Nothing is asked, nothing is pursued. There's no reaction. You simply are. And from that being, reality responds without friction. Here, everything learned in previous levels integrates naturally. Responsibility no longer weighs, effort no longer tenses, achievement no longer defines, intention is no longer monitored, flow no longer surprises, service is no longer questioned. Everything occurs from a stable internal center. Action continues existing, but it's no longer born from fear or desire for control. It's born from a silent coherence that needs no demonstration. This state has been described by thinkers who understood that freedom doesn't consist of doing more, but of aligning with the deep nature of what is. As Baruch Spinoza intuited, when the mind stops resisting reality and orders itself internally, a potency emerges that doesn't depend on effort. At this level, that understanding is lived, not as a philosophical idea, but as an embodied state. The essential practice here is sustained conscious presence. Remaining centered even when everything moves, emitting coherence without needing to correct the world, fully trusting the internal state built throughout the journey. There's no constant vigilance, there's stability. There's no anxiety for results, there's clarity. Power no longer rises and falls, it becomes constant. The result of this consciousness is unstoppable power without wear. Decisions are born clear, words weigh without imposing, actions order without forcing. Life no longer feels like something that must be managed, but like something that cooperates. And then the final truth of this level reveals itself. When you no longer seek power, you become power. The power that isn't lost. This audiobook wasn't created to take you to a different place, but to return you to yourself with greater clarity. Each level wasn't a label, it was a training. Each tool wasn't a technique, it was a way to mature consciousness. Advancing didn't mean becoming someone new, it meant stopping fragmenting yourself. Unstoppable power doesn't appear suddenly, it builds when you stop reacting. It strengthens when you order your energy. It stabilizes when you align intention, action, and purpose. And it becomes permanent when it no longer depends on anything external. What before seemed like effort, today is coherence. What before seemed like control, today is presence. It's not about staying at the top, it's about not living unconsciously at the bottom again. Each integrated level becomes a foundation. Each sustained understanding becomes available force. And when consciousness is trained this way, life stops being a constant test and transforms into a space of expression. Unstoppable power doesn't shout, doesn't compete, doesn't impose. It's felt, it radiates, it sustains. And now that you know how to advance, how to integrate, and how to remain, you no longer need to search outside for what was always active within you. This audiobook is just a door. On this channel, you'll find other journeys designed to continue expanding your consciousness, understanding the invisible origin of money, discovering why not everyone is ready for certain secrets, understanding how internal reflection creates abundance, activating the power of sleep as a real tool, and accessing keys that weren't written for the masses. Each audiobook deepens a different layer of the same awakening, not to accumulate information, but to continue refining your perception, your energy, and your personal power. Listen to the one that resonates with you now, because when content calls to you, it's not to entertain you, it's to activate you. If this journey resonated with you and you're ready to continue expanding your consciousness, subscribe to this channel now. Each video is designed to unlock a new level of awareness and personal power. Don't miss the transformations waiting for you. Hit that subscribe button and join a community committed to conscious evolution. Your next breakthrough is just one click away.